Thank you for coming. This is an Azure API Management session, and if you are looking to learn about what API Management is and why would you want to use it, you're in the right place. I am Vlad Vinogradsky. This is Matthew Farmer.
Hello.
And this is Don Bushell, who is joining us from Boeing. So let me tell you a little bit about what's going to happen in the next 75 minutes. So we're going to start off, actually, we decided to try something unusual. So normally we would start by telling you why people use API management, right? What value does it provide so to get your interest? So I figured it would be much better if a customer of API management will tell his story, and that's where Don graciously agreed to participate in our session. Then after that, we're going to actually tell you a little bit about the product. We'll give you sort of the highlights about what the product is and how it works. Then Matthew will show you a great demo touching on selling parts of the product. After that, we're going to cover a little bit of things that we didn't really show you, but which are, we think, important differentiators and capabilities that you might be interested in learning about. Then we're going to show you something completely new that you're going to see here for the first time, almost for the first time, right? So we kind of don't tell you what it is yet, but you will see. I think you'll like it. And then we'll wrap up and we'll have a quick Q&A.
Should we do a quick show of hands before we start, Vlad?
We could. So can you guys show hands who used or know about API management?
Ooh.
A few hands. Thank you. We appreciate that. And with that, let's start with Don. Here you go.
Oh, yeah.
You might want to, yeah.
OK, show of hands again. How many of you flew here to Ignite? OK, a lot of you. You already have a connection to Boeing. Everyone that had their hands up anyways. And that's because, whether you know it or not, the aircraft that you flew on or the software that made your flight possible was built by Boeing. My name is Don Bushell. I'm a product manager working at Boeing, a company that builds that jet. This is the 777X. This will be the world's biggest twin-engine jet ever built, with significantly lower operating costs, drastically reduced emissions, and the longest wingspan on any airplane ever. This will enable people from parts of the world to connect in ways they've never been able to before. Boeing builds that plane, but I build the software that makes flying that plane possible.
Clicker doesn't work, OK.
Thank you. Okay. So, whatever, I don't really need this, thanks. So Boeing's a massive company. Been around for over 100 years, 150,000 employees. We do business with people, companies, in over 150 countries around the world. Fortune 25 company. And the coolest statistic ever is that we build every day 2.12 airplanes. I don't really know what we do with the 0.12 every day, but it's a cool statistic nonetheless. But like I said, Boeing is massive. And there are really three companies that make up Boeing. There's Boeing Commercial, that got us all here, Boeing Defense and Space, and Boeing Global Services. That's where I work. Specifically, in that small square in the upper right called Digital Aviation and Analytics. In DA&A, our goal is to enable something we call the digital airline. And we're doing that with the help of Azure API Management. Go ahead. So when you hear Satya talk, and everyone's really here because we're working on our own digital transformation journeys, just like Boeing and Microsoft and all of our companies. Even though I would imagine very few of you are in the airline industry with me, I think that all of us can look at these goals and realize that we share commonality there. All of our industries, all of our companies, our teams are all going through the same transformation. We're all trying to reduce overhead costs. We're all trying to monitor our competition and make sure we stay one step ahead of them. Every one of us is trying to deliver value faster to our customers. And while we go about doing those things in different ways, our digital transformation journeys are all powered by the same goals. Go ahead. And that's why. That's why we're here. That's why we're talking about digital transformation. But how? How are we doing that? Well, in order to solve any problem, I believe that you have to first understand it. And so when Boeing was looking at how do we then digitally transform ourselves, we had to look at how we built products. How do we build the software that we currently deliver to our customers, to airlines around the world? And this is how we did it. Look, a very complicated slide, isn't it? This is how we built products. This product took a long time to build. It's monolithic. It's not easily integrated with other products. It has infrastructure that is old and costly. And we had to start from scratch to build it. Go ahead, go next. And then when you think about that product, we have an entire portfolio of products just like it. And every one of those products had to get built from scratch, monolithic, took forever. Okay, we see the problem. We need to do things faster. Going back to the why we're here, we have to deliver value faster. So how do we do that? Well, when you look at the portfolio from this point of view, from the macro level, you start to see commonalities amongst these products. These, I should say. You start to see that in each of these products, there are similar functionalities. There's similar data across the portfolio. But why are we rebuilding the same things over and over again every time we want to stamp out a new product? Maybe there's a better way of doing it. And we went back to the drawing board using the technology of today and found that there was. Go ahead. So we've decided to take a look at how to build a product in the modern world using cloud technologies. And we found that across our portfolio, there was a lot of data, like I said, that is shared between these products. And that could be represented by these very kindergarten-esque shapes. You know, that these are things like, in my industry, all of our products need weather data, need to understand what's happening in an airport, need to understand where planes are in the sky, those kinds of things. So when you're looking at a product and you decompose it down into its core pieces, you start to see that, oh, okay, that's how this product is working. There's really some pieces that we're stitching together with business logic and wrapping in a sexy UI, and that's really what it is. So then taking that mindset and going to the portfolio level, we start to see that all of our products can be decomposed like that. Every one of them can be thought of as a collection of smaller modular pieces that are stitched together, wrapped up, and sold. We want to enable our teams, our product teams that are building software to deliver to airlines. We want to enable those teams to build better software, cheaper software, and deliver it faster. And the way that we're doing that is by providing an API store. And yes, I know you've probably caught on that all of those wonderful shapes are actually APIs. Well, we couldn't do this unless we have that bottom piece, that common repository where these product teams and developers and architects can go to grab those shapes and put them together, unless we had something like a store. So, go ahead. In thinking about how you build that API store, there's a lot to think about. There's a lot of challenges. And Boeing, a massive company, we could have built that on our own. We could have spent our finite time and resources to build an API store that addresses all of these challenges. But I think there's a better way to spend our time. And when we use Azure API Management, We're able to focus now on our domain expertise. We can focus on solving aviation problems instead of solving the governance problems, making sure that things are secure and scalable and usable. So go next. So this is how we have rebuilt our portfolio. This is how we've digitally transformed ourselves by looking at building our products in a modular fashion using Azure API Management to power all of those APIs. You'll see that the backends here are supported by Azure and on-premise systems. And that's because we know we have systems that, for one reason or another, will stay on-premise. But we can still make progress. And now that I've talked a lot about how and why we've done this, I'd like to show you what we've done. So if I can come over here. Excellent. So, perfect. This is Helix. Internally, that's the code name that we've given for our API store. What you're looking at here is a highly customized Azure API Management developer portal. We've designed this user interface entirely with the developer persona in mind. We want to make it easy for someone to come to this site, find what they're looking for, get the data they need, and get on with building value. So, looking at what we have, I want to jump right into it. I'm already logged in. I'll just click on that big blue button that says, let's take a look at the APIs that are in Helix. And when you do this, when any of our developers in Boeing do this, oh, and by the way, I should mention that this is our non-production site. This is our test site, so this isn't what actual customers are using. When you do this, you can see all of the APIs that we've built. And we're constantly adding more to this site. And the most important part of this is that we're building an ecosystem where not only the development team that built this site in partnership with API Management can contribute APIs, but other teams across our organization can contribute APIs they've built. We're enabling that virtuous cycle where more people contribute, more people consume, and it becomes this nexus of digital transformation for our company. So really quickly, I'll walk through what it might look like to be a developer and how you might use one of our APIs. So maybe you're building an application that needs to track aircraft flying in and out of airports. Very, very common use case. So we have an airports API in the upper right. So I'll click on that, and we'll get directed to the airports details page. It tells you roughly what this API is, some terms and conditions about how and when and where you can use it, the data it provides, and some SLA information. So again, I'm a developer. I'll click on documentation. That's really what I care about. When I'm looking at this API, there's a few operations on the left, and we're looking at what we call Swagger documentation, or Open API 2.0. But looking at all of these things, it has, we can look at the schema. We can see exactly what this API will return to a developer, to an application with a successful call. We can look at some metadata about what those things mean when you return to GeoJSON about an airport. What does that mean? And then at the bottom, maybe the coolest part. When I demo this internally to Boeing, people say, yeah, I get it, but it's still a lot of work for me to implement. Well, it's really not. Azure API Management has made it so easy by providing out-of-the-box code samples in many languages so developers can take these snippets of code, substitute their API key, drop that in their app, and they're going. So, without further ado, let's take a look at what it looks like to use this API. I'll look up an API by IATA code and get some data about it. So here I am. I'll type in the code for Orlando, which is MCO. Come down and hit send. And in 16 milliseconds, a 16 millisecond response, I was able to get this information. Gee whiz, Don, who cares, right? Well, it's really, really important for us. What I just did in 16 milliseconds used to take people in Boeing 8 months. Getting the data to power our products used to be so onerous. But look what I just did. That was so easy. Now, that's not all that API management does, and not all we're using it for. There's tons of APIs like I was showing you before. All of those work roughly the same. But there's a lot of other value that comes with this. One of the key things that we're using Azure API Management for is to make sure we know how much people are using our services. How much traffic is a certain product driving to one of these back-end services? And the My Usage area really helps with that. Of course, I'm a product manager, so I'm not a developer. I don't have super interesting usage patterns like an application would. But looking at this, you get an understanding of the kind of granularity of detail around who is using this API how much. Is it performing like you would expect it to, or is there something that I need to look at? Maybe that 16 millisecond response is 16,000, and then you need to investigate that issue. This really helps with that. So I could go into great detail about everything and all the great work that Azure API Management has enabled us to do, but there is a finite amount of time here, so I'll turn it over to Vlad.
Thank you.
Give a round of applause for Don for coming out and talking about it. Thanks, Don.
Thanks.
So can you go to 5, please?
I don't know if that's working.
All right, let's give it one more try. OK, it's working.
I fail at pressing buttons.
Now, when you saw this cool effect, right, that means we're entering a new section, right? So you know that the subject will switch. Just a hint. So, Don gave us a great presentation. I think he motivated API management, very well. And he was mostly focusing on the value of APIs for this multi-speed IT scenario. This is sort of an industry term. The idea is that the line of business systems are very slow-moving, slow-evolving, and you need to have sort of multiple layers of abstraction to allow you to move faster, and that's what APIs really provide. But there are also other applications of APIs, and we see a lot of customers doing these other things with APIs, such as developing ecosystems. So developing new innovative business model, scalable partner enablement, channels to new customers. And of course, user engagement is where mobile apps come in, right? Everybody has mobile apps. All the airlines, of course, you probably used some of these apps on the way here. So all of these things are enabled by APIs, and APIs are really becoming strategic to enterprises because they actually enable you to directly solve some important business problems and be more competitive and drive your business forward. And that sort of wraps up the idea of APIs and why APIs are really important in the enterprise. Now, with that importance, you have to actually manage them carefully, right? Since this is a strategic asset, it has to be managed. And that's where API management comes in. And as Don illustrated, API management really becomes this API store or hub for your APIs, internal or external, doesn't really matter. And as you can see, this is sort of a multi-sided product where you have API managers and API developers. Don represents that group of users. And those users are interested in building and surfacing the APIs. And then there are app developers that take advantage of those APIs to build these cool products on top of them. And so there's a publishing side, exposing APIs, and consumption side. And the demo that Don showed focused on the consumption side, on the developer experience. And Matthew will focus on the, on the publishing side, on the Azure portal side. So you're going to see that shortly. But as Don was saying, as a publisher, he has a bunch of concerns, right? It's about really abstracting the APIs and hiding them, about scaling them, protecting them, about productizing those APIs, meaning managing who can use which APIs, sometimes monetizing APIs. And then on the consumption side, developers are really want to be able to discover which APIs are available, understand what are they for, learn how to use them quickly, get to this proverbial first successful call in seconds, and then maybe get some help with their coding, right? So that's what sort of these guys are looking for. And then, of course, that is what our product provides. And in addition to that, in addition to enabling that virtuous cycle between exposing and consuming APIs, we also allow a degree of control afforded by this mediation layer, which is implemented through a scalable gateway that we have. And important thing to understand is that API management, even though it's an Azure product, it really we really can work with any APIs either on Azure or outside, as long as these are HTTP-based API. It could be SOAP, it could be what's called RESTful APIs. As long as it's HTTP endpoint that we can reach either directly or over a virtual network, a VPN, we are good to go. So we absolutely don't differentiate on where the APIs are or what technology stack they're running on. So let's talk a little bit about where the power of APIs comes from, right? So you saw this mediation component, right? And a lot of things that you do in API management actually result in application of policies. Policies are small, sort of encapsulations of common API management functions that you can compose together, so string along in the pipeline and execute either in the inbound or outbound direction. And they can also be applied in multiple scopes, and you can see some of those policies available here as an example, and of course you'll see Matt shortly applying those. So let's talk about scopes. So we have actually 4 scopes out of the gate. So as you can see, there's inbound direction from the caller to the backend, and then of course outbound all the way back. And you can see that we have global scope, which basically all APIs that you defined. So whatever policy you set at that scope will affect every API that you define in API management. Product scope will affect only APIs within the product, and product is just a way to package your APIs and publish them to a certain group of developers. And then, of course, you can affect specific API or even specific operation of the API. And then using, again, advanced policies, you can actually sort of do other scopes in sort of more sophisticated scopes. So, some of the policies that we have, they make sense to apply across the board. For example, cross-domain access, logging. At the product level, you probably want to rate, limit, and impose some call quota. Imagine you have products for internal and external developers, or your silver, gold, platinum products, right, which may have different quotas and different rate limits associated with them. At the API level, you might want to apply some security settings. Authentication require a valid JOT token and validate certain claims within it. And then at the operational level, you probably want to sort of configure caching, maybe some URL rewrites to make your URLs more RESTful, prettier, or easier to use, as well as maybe just the content of the body. And then, when request comes in, we use information in the request to determine these scopes, right? We use key to determine the product. And of course, we use, sort of path associated with the request to understand which API and operation it applies to. And then we, of course, combine in a smart way all these policies and apply them to that request. So that's basically how it works, and you'll see it in action with, during the demo that Matthew will show you. Policies are made a lot more powerful with policy expressions. So policy expressions can configure policy settings and their dynamic, conditional execution. And here you can see sort of a very simple example where we have a set variable policy, which basically extracts here through an expression, use of an expression, it's just C#. So we use this context object that will make available in expressions. It contains all the information about the request. So we extract the length of the content length header into this body size variable. Then we're using conditional execution policy and check the body size value against, and see if it's actually smaller than 256K. And if it is, we repoint or sort of forward that request to a special alternative path and alternative backend, right? Because we, process small requests differently than larger requests, let's say. So it's just basically an example to show you sort of how these expressions work. And the interesting thing is that these are templatized parameters that you can actually define once and reuse across all the policies and then change them in one place, and they will affect, everything else. And you can define, the same named template parameters in different environments, test and production, and assign different values. And this is a very nice way to manage those kind of magic constants that you want. So another interesting capability, obviously, everything is sort of moving forward, right? And APIs evolve. And versioning is extremely important, but highly debated subject. There's a lot of questions that people keep arguing about. And frankly, if you're following API sort of literature and media around it, you'll see that every week you have 1 or 2 new articles about versioning of APIs, right? There's still sort of, it's a fairly small space, but people still arguing about it. So what we did is that we decided that since it's such a sort of highly debated subject, we want to stay neutral. and provide you with mechanisms and allow you to set the policy, exactly how you want to do versioning. And essentially, we set ourselves a few goals. First, that we natively understand versions inside the system. It's a first-class concept. That versioning can be used optionally. So if you don't want to use versioning, if you're doing something quick, if you're evaluating, we're not going to force them on you, right? So it's an opt-in. We offer you a choice of versioning schemes. We automatically inform developers about the changes you make to the API, so you don't have to worry about it. So they're always aware if there's a new version is available. And then we put you in control of when the changes that you made to the API get adopted by your developers to a degree. And so we came up with those two things, right? We came up with versions and revisions. And Matthew will go into depth in his demo on those two concepts. But they really are at the center of how you change and evolve your API. And one gives you full control of when you push it live. And the other one gives customer choice of when to adopt one. So this is what basically APIs look without versioning, right? There is some sort of base URL. There is an API name, which is foo in this case, and there's a bunch of operations there. Now, with versions and revisions, the model becomes a little bit more complicated, but so much more powerful, where you have each API can have multiple versions, and each version can have multiple revisions. And as you can see, some of those revisions are sort of pale color, pale green. This means that they are available only offline. You can't really send requests to them. The ones that are solid color are available online, and they can be called. And only one of those with the red border is the one that is currently active and receiving calls for that API, right? So that gives you an idea. It's sort of slots-like idea for managing your change safely. And with that, we are ready for a lap around demo.
Thank you, Vlad. OK. There we are. So I'm going to do kind of a couple of demos now. The first one's going to be for those of you who didn't put your hands up at the beginning, who don't really know how the product works, and that's going to just give you a sense for how we create an API facade in API management and apply a policy to it. For those of you who are familiar, bear with me. What we're then going to do is look in a bit more detail at how the versions and revisions features actually work. And you'll be able to see an example of how you would go about applying a version or using revisions to manage change. Let's go through the basics first. So for those of you who came to the product a while ago, we had the publisher portal and developer portal. We've now pretty much entirely moved all of API management into the new Azure portal. Hopefully, if you've been to sessions this week, you've seen the new Azure portal, so I'm not going to tell you too much more about that. But this is what you will see when you come into the Azure portal. This instance I'm showing you here has got lots of lovely traffic running through it at the moment, so you get a visualization of that. And there's lots of properties and features of the product available here. I'm not going to go into each and every one of them. What I am going to go and do is show you the API design surface that's available within this, within the Azure portal. As it's a bit different from if you use the publisher portal, what you're familiar with. So what we have here is a way for you to add API facades, configure them, and manage them. And we're going to create a new one today. And when you do that, you will see this interface here. And what I want to just call out here is the types of APIs you can import into Azure API Management. Those of you who follow the technology in this area will probably be familiar with OpenAPI. The OpenAPI spec used to be called Swagger. We absolutely support Swagger, and we're working on Swagger v3 that should be available sometime soon. But there's other choices for this as well. So if your developers, if you have any SOAP services that you want to actually create and push out there as SOAP APIs, you can do that. We also give you the ability now to take that SOAP API and turn it into a REST API within Azure API Management. We're also really keen on making sure that other services in Azure are really first-class citizens, and you can import them really, really easily. So if you're doing all your development in the cloud, or some of it in the cloud, you can take things like logic apps, API apps, and functions, and the process of importing them is as simple as making a few clicks, and then you have an API created. But what we're going to do today is we're going to use an open API. And we've got one here, which is a web API that we've generated the WSDL for. I'm just sorry, not the WSDL, the Swagger for. I'm just going to copy this URL, and we're going to take it and put it into our Open API specification window. We drop this URL here. Obviously, if you have the text file, you can use that and upload it as well. So when I click off, all things being good, whoops, what's going on with the UI then? There we go. I didn't do my demo practice. There we go. What on earth's going on with the UI thing? So we're just going to refresh this page and hope that goes away. And we'll call that blame it on the network. There we go. These things happen. So there we go. We're going to try again. I've never actually seen that happen before, so that must be something very unusual. So we're going to load up the page now. We're going to add in our Open API specification, and what that's going to do is take the back-end API and create a facade of that API in API management. And you'll notice we have small conference API and big conference API. It seems to be this company is definitely growing, so this is going to be huge conference API, I think we're going to call this. So let's try this again and hope it all works fine. There we go. We've still got these weird artifacts on the screen. I don't know why that is, but you know, we'll go with it. So we're going to change the name of this to be Huge Conference API. And we're going to give it an API suffix. So that's the bit at the end of the name of the API management server that you call this API on. So it will be your server/hugeconf, we're going to call it for shortness here. Finally, there's this concept of products. So this is the way in which you package up APIs to repurpose and make them available for developers who you want to call them. So for example, you may only want certain APIs to be available to certain developers. In fact, that's a very common use case for anybody who might try this. The products, and we'll go into this later, but products also allow you to apply specific policies to them. So for example, and I'll show you this soon, if you wanted to apply a rate limit to certain products so developers can't call your API very often and put pressure on your backend services, you can do that at a product level as well as API or operation. So we're just going to add it to our unlimited product for now. And you'll notice this little version the API thing. We'll come back to that, but you can actually version an API from scratch when you import it. So there we go. So we've created Huge Conference API. So what do we actually get here in the interface? So what you can see is a list of all our operations. And you'll notice in this area on the screen, we have the front end, inbound processing, back end, outbound. And that's a request response flow. So requests come into the front end. We can process them. This is where we can apply policies, where we can do caching, where we can do a whole bunch of stuff to what's actually going on, transform it into something completely different, send that request to the back end if we choose to do so. And then when the response comes back, we still have an opportunity to do some more transformations and logging, whatever we wish to do before we pass the request back. And that's that mediation layer that's so powerful in allowing you to transform, shape, and control the API request response flow. So let's show you how simple policies might work in this respect. So I'm just going to go and add a policy to this API that I've put in now, and just to give you a flavor of how they work. So we're going to do it for all operations calling this API. And I'm going to click this a little bit and drop down the code editor for policies. And now, in the policy editor, what you would normally do is you would drag across these policy snippets, as we call them, which are little pre-canned parts of code that you can put into the policy engine and execute. Like every good demoer, here's one I've prepared earlier. That joke will only work with British people, by the way. It doesn't go with anybody else. Sorry, I can't help myself. But there we go. We've created a policy, and it just to show you what this actually is. We'll zoom in, and you can see this is the policy code, but you can also see this area here. Whoops, there you go. Draw an arrow. There we go. That is what we call a policy expression. So effectively, if you're familiar with C# code, or the way in which C# code works, you can see that we're effectively accessing an object. It's the property of the context subscription, and we're bringing in the ID. So what we're doing is making sure that this rate limit is checking the ID that comes in with the request and saying, if you're trying to call me more than 3 times in 10 seconds, then I'm going to say no. Now the really nerve-wracking part, well, after we save it, should we go and test that out and make sure it works? It's the time-honored rate limit demo. where everybody crosses their fingers and just proves that it works. So we're going to go into Huge Conference API now. Obviously, you saw Don demoing the developer portal before. This is the vanilla developer portal as it comes out of the box. We're just going to go and try get sessions, I think we'll do. And we're going to click try it and just check that that policy works. So, fingers crossed. There we go. So we got a response back. Fine. The rate limit won't kick in yet. But if I hit it a few more times, notice the latency going down as the backend speeds up. There we go. Oh, there we go. It did kick in, and I just missed it. We'll do it again. 429, too many requests. So just proving to you that I'm very pleased with that. You can applause if you want, but it's a fairly standard demo. Just showing you how really, really simple it is to set up some of the classic things that people want to do with APIs. And that's basically how you can modify that flow in Azure API Management. Right, let's go do something a little bit more interesting for those of you who are really familiar with the product. We have added a feature, as Vlad was talking about, that's really about managing change. And there's two kinds of change we identified. There's the type of change with an API that doesn't break it for people who are existing users and calling it. And then there's a type of change that really you don't want to apply to the same API. And that we call those changes revisions and versions. I'm going to show you revisions first and give you an example of how that works, and then we'll look at versions. So let's say that I wanted to add a new operation to Huge Conference API. I can add it here, and it's going to return some important stuff, so I'm going to call it stuff. And save that operation there. Now, doing this today in an API, that change is available and live straight away. And really the benefit of revisions is it allows you to take those changes, package them up in a safe way, test them out, and then make them live for a user. So that's the way you would have done it before. We're actually going to do it with a revision. So I'm creating a revision now. Revision for get stuff. And what this does, I can drop it down, is it creates a complete copy of the API that's now isolated away for you to make changes. So you can make those changes without worrying about it affecting the callers of your API. It won't affect that request response flow that your users are already managing their APIs with. So let's go. We've now selected revision 2, and we can go and make the change here. In fact, to make sure we know it's actually different, I'm going to call it something slightly different. So we'll call it lots of stuff. And we're going to save it. And just to prove to you that those two different revisions are different, if I select revision 1, you can see that the get stuff is there, but get lots of stuff isn't there. Revision 2 gets lots of stuff there. They're completely separate APIs, but only you as the API administrator and developer know about them. We're going to prove this works with just another little feature that I'm going to show you that we've added over the past year, which is the ability to mock API responses. So if you want to make changes to your API and you want your front-end developers to be able to get access to those APIs right here and now, not have to worry about the back-end to be developed, you can add a mock. So we're going to use a very, very simple static one with a 200 response. 200 OK, and save it. And we've got mocking enabled now for this operation. I can go and test that now. And I get a 200 response back. The interesting thing here, and I will zoom in again to show it, oops, is the URL. And Vlad mentioned this earlier. All the revisions we create come with a private URL. We call it the private URL. And you can turn this on and off, so if you don't want people to know anything about it, but effectively, it allows you to test out your revision. So you can make your changes, test them out because you'll know what revision URL you're calling it on, turn that revision URL off if you're concerned about people getting access to it. And then the next thing I'll show you, which is take that revision and then push it live. So you can make it current and make it so that it's in the request response flow for your users. So let's do this now. So we've got revision for get stuff. We're going to make that current. And when we make it current, we're given the option of posting to what's called the changelog for your API. So if you're making non-breaking changes, you probably want to tell your users about it. Give them the history of changes that have happened, because you don't know when they last accessed the API and got documentation. So this gives you the opportunity to give them a note to tell them what's going on, and it's presented historically in the developer portal. So let's just do that now. Added. Obviously, we entirely recommend being a bit more verbose with your comments than I'm doing now, but there we go. So we now have an entry in the changelog. And finally, with revisions, if we go to the developer portal, we can see the change history. I did get lots of stuff. So that's revisions. They're a really great way to manage change in a safe way, not break your developers calling your APIs, try stuff out. The next thing I'm going to show you is versions. How do revisions and versions link together? Well, the other thing on this menu is you can also create a version from revision. So if you go and make a whole bunch of revision changes and you find they're breaking, you find that they are, you're concerned that you're going to break your users, go and make a proper version from it. But let's do an actual version with Huge Conference API. So we put in what we think is a pretty comprehensive versioning strategy for API management. It allows you, well, as part of building this feature, we went out and talked to lots of customers, maybe some of you in the audience, about what the best versioning strategy was and what you were really looking for. And you gave us lots of really great answers. Unfortunately, pretty much all of them disagreed with everybody else. So everybody knew what the right way was. Unfortunately, they were all different. So what we tried to do is make sure you had real flexibility in the way you apply this. And then it's up to you to think of the best way for your business. So we can create a version called v1 in the path. And what will happen there is v1 will be appended to the path. And I can use any string I want there. So if I want to use date-based versioning, if I want to give the version a name, a code name, I'm entirely at liberty to do that. However, I can also, if I don't agree that path versioning is the right way to go, I can use header-based versioning. So I can even control the name of the header parameter that I'm using here. And then we, in the UI, show you what that would look like. So you pass in a header parameter, and you select the version that way. Or I can change it to query string, and that can be appended to the end of the request. But we're just going to very quickly show path being set up. And what you'll see in the UI is we have original. We don't want to break you if you've already got an API in API management and you want to add versioning. We don't want to break you, so we just keep the original version. That's responding on the original URL you always had. But then we create v1, because I called it that. And this is actually a completely separate API. And this is the thing to make clear. These APIs are linked together by a versioning scheme. But I can import a completely new Swagger. I can completely change that API. It doesn't have to bear any relation to the previous version if I want to do something completely radical. It's entirely up to you how you want to present that out to your users. Very quickly, because I've waffled on for quite a while, we'll show you how that looks in the developer portal. So we've got a huge conference API here. We get original and v1, so users see the documentation about those versions as well. Happy to talk more about that feature if you're interested in it, but until I come back in a bit, back to Vlad.
Thanks, Matthew. So I guess, hopefully this demonstration gave you a little bit of understanding what API management is and does and how it works. So now we're going to cover a few other capabilities of API management that we didn't cover yet. And this one, sort of, you saw it in action when Matthew imported Swagger for a certain API. And this is where you create your facade and sort of a front door for your API or APIs, right? And this is kind of a very basic functionality, and it's also a very important and often used pattern, really, in software engineering, adding a layer of abstraction, essentially. But it's underappreciated. Now, I'll illustrate what I mean. So, we'll focus on the gateway, and, let's assume that you have an API app running on Azure websites, app service, I'm sorry. So there is the URL for that app, and let's say it's obviously exposing some sort of API. So you decide to project it to your developers through API management, and you imported Swagger. And now you created essentially a facade and a front door for your backend API. So your backend API is where it was, happily running there. The gesture of importing it into API management creates exact replica of that backend API, right? There are no changes, exactly the same. It has a different URL though, right? And that essentially abstracts the location of your backend, right? And now all the traffic to your backend API will flow through that endpoint, because that's the only endpoint that customers or your clients of your API can actually access. Now, you can also assign a nice custom domain name for your API, and that is the only URL that your customers will have to remember for all of your APIs, because the way API is identified in API management is by this first segment of the path, right? In this case, it's full. That affords you a capability of actually moving your API or changing its location and hostname. Moreover, you can actually make your API look and feel and behave differently through policies in API management, right? So essentially, you can either maybe restrict the surface that you make available to external callers. You can change the way URLs look. You can filter content or enrich the content that flows in and out of this API. So it can be actually very different shape. And that's the only thing that your clients are using and seeing, right? And they have no idea how it's implemented on the back end. That affords you, assuming that you have API apps, sort of monolithic approach, so you wanted to go microservices, well, you can just do that, right? Without disturbing your clients at all, right? The clients still deal with the interface exposed by API management, and API management intelligently routes and converts the incoming requests to wherever they need to go, right? So that is a really, really important and interesting capability in API management. The other one is revolving around security. And again, since we have this front door, right, all the traffic goes through the one single place. This is a point of leverage and points of control where you can actually apply your security policies. API management has multiple sites, right? There's 4 places where security matters here. And we have different capabilities in all these 4 areas. I'm going to start at the top for app developers. So, so this is for accessing Developer Portal. Developer Portal is not Microsoft Portal. It's the portal of your company. And it's accessed by your customers, right? And we support a multitude of different authentication mechanisms there, starting with the username, password, through social accounts, to Azure Active Directory integration for your employee users, as well as Azure Active Directory B2C, if you want to use that for federation with various other sort of identity providers. And then we have this delegated authentication feature where you essentially can kind of plug in your own custom authentication mechanism if none of the above work for you. On the gateway side, we start with a key. It's applied by default, but it is optional. You don't necessarily have to use keys. Keys allows us to track requests and sort of align them to a specific product. But if you don't want to use them, you don't have to. We support OAuth and OpenID Connect. We support client certificate authentication. We can perform IP filtering if you want to enable or disable certain IP addresses only to access your APIs. And of course, you saw rate limits, and we also have call quotas as well. On the API manager, API developer side, Obviously, we are in Azure portal, so essentially standard Azure authentication mechanisms is what you use with full RBAC support. And then, of course, it's very important to have a secure channel between API management and backends, so that backends sort of know that requests are coming from the trusted source, but also to ensure that no request can go around API management, right? And so there you can use anything from basic to mutual certificate authentication to some shared secret. API management has a stable IP address, so you can actually configure firewall rules on the backend side to filter by that IP address. And of course, for further security, you can use virtual networks and network security groups to further sort of tighten up your backend security. So speaking of VNets, I'll show you how that works, and it's a very powerful capability that we have in premium tier. So again, consider that you have an app service, an isolated plan. Isolated plan allows you to have a private sort of app service hosted in a virtual network. Well, you can actually join in API management. Oops, sorry, too many clicks. It's going to work sporadically, this thing. So can I just go back? Yeah. Cool. So you can join in gateway, in fact, actually API management instance into that virtual network. And that way, essentially, these APIs become only privately accessible by API management, but not anyone outside that virtual network. And so at that point, gateway can become the only public surface by which you can get to your APIs, right? Because everything is contained within a virtual network. Moreover, for further security, you can actually compose API management gateway with an application gateway, which is essentially a web application firewall. And again, at that point, gateway becomes internal, and the public surface is application gateway. And if you need to access API on-prem or outside of Azure securely, you can, through gateway and VPN technology, establish that connection as well, very securely. And if you have significant volume of traffic flowing through that connection, you can go and use ExpressRoute. So all of that is supported in API Management Premium Edition. And lastly, I want to talk a little bit about multi-region and scaling. Obviously, Azure is the most widely deployed public cloud. We are in 27 public regions in all the geographies, with customers in every geography and every region we are in. We're actually in preview in US government regions and soon coming to China. So let's consider an example. So let's say you have customers in Europe, and you have a deployment in Europe, Service Fabric in this case, some APIs running on that you want to expose to those customers. Well, you create an API management instance there, and you start serving those customers. And that's great. That works very well. And then the traffic grows, and you can scale API management by adding more units. Units linearly scale the capacity of your API management instance. And then you expand in the US, and you have customers there. Well, to begin with, these customers actually access your instance in Europe. But that adds latency, obviously, right? Connection establishment, and then sending requests and responses back and forth. Obviously, they have perceived latency that is higher than customers in Europe. But while the traffic is not very high, it's OK. But then you decide that you want to actually change. You want to provide first-class experience to your customers in the US. Well, what you're going to do is you're going to upgrade to Premium. And Premium is much more powerful out of the box. And by the way, have also native integration with Service Fabric, which is a plus in this case. You just deploy that. And it has this wonderful capability of being multi-region. So you can actually deploy another unit in a different region, in this case in the US. And that way, you can sort of switch traffic. One more time, OK. Like this, to go through API management in US to your Service Fabric backend in Europe. That improves things a bit, right? Because API management has built-in cache. And for GET requests that are cached, the perceived latency of customers in US will be low, right? Because they will be getting their responses mostly from cache, and that's an improvement. But at some point, you would probably want to also deploy a replica of your backend in US and then you run deployment like this. And of course, as your traffic in US grows substantially, you can scale up whatever region and all these regions independently. So that's a premium feature for multi-region and scaling in API management. And now we are on to our secret new announcement, which Matthew will tell you.
Something completely different. So this is the time of the presentation. We're nearly done, but I get to now say, and help me if this is true, would you like to see something cool?
Yay.
Good. That's the correct response. Well done. So one of the things we see customers of API management asking for more and more these days is APIs are very much were considered a really technical thing. It's something IT cared about. But that is really changing now. More and more of our customers are seeing the APIs they produce, they put out there, as something that really business people really care about. How many people are using our APIs if we're pushing them out there? How many times are our partners using our APIs? And the way in which you give out data about these needs to be something that perhaps isn't stuck in IT assets like the Azure portal. Wrong PC. And to elaborate on this, if you want to share your reports on APIs with business users, there's this idea of an API product manager. More and more customers have this role as someone who really, really cares about getting people to use those APIs, seeing how they perform, improving upon them. And you want to do that with reports that, people have different requirements for the reports they get out about their data. And not everybody's the same. Some want to focus on one particular operation or a particular API. You want to be able to customize them based on what's relevant to you. Hey, and why not, when you're doing that, get some deeper insight into what's really going on, how people are using our APIs. The other thing they ask for is the data. The data about their API usage is something that they really want to be theirs. So being able to take that data and take it and move it into a store that you control as a customer. So what if we could do all that with really eye-catching Power BI reports, Power BI dashboards? And the thing I'm going to show you today is what we're calling the Azure API Management Analytics Power BI Solution Template. That's a bit of a mouthful. But it's something we've just finished and just released, and we really would like to see what you think of it. So I'm going to switch over and show you what it looks like. So this is a Power BI report running in a browser. And I'll explain what this thing is and how you deploy it in a minute. But I want you really to understand these reports and see these as something that you maybe could use with your API data and share with your business. So the report has a number of different pages, and they're all tailored to a slightly different case. This is the at-a-glance page. This is really designed to help you publicize the information out about your APIs at the most basic level. So this is the thing you might have on you might even have it on a monitor somewhere for people to see. But like any Power BI report, it's entirely sliceable. So you can change the data in the report by clicking on particular areas of it so you can understand more about the data within it. We got the API call screen, which is a really deep dive into what's happening with all my API data. You get a map that shows you where your calls are coming from. You can go and, again, apply slices to all this data so you can see what's happening with different APIs. And you can apply multiple slices so you can find out, if this subscription's calling this particular operation, how much is that happening? The errors report gives you detailed errors on both the backend, so your backend API and when it's revealing errors, and also errors that happen time to time in API management. So you can delve into that and work out what's going on with particular error conditions. And then we decided to go a little bit further. And so we have this great team in Microsoft called Microsoft Research. And we approached them to say, well, what could you help us with in terms of giving API management customers some real insight into what's going on with the data? And I don't want to go too much into the science behind it, but this is what's an illustration of what's called a fast Fourier transform. Please don't ask me any more detail on what one of those is. but this is designed to show you information about the patterns within your API data. If I zoom in and have a look at this particular data here. One of the things our customers are most concerned about, imagine you have an API that publishes information that would be valuable to others if they could extract all your data. One of the things you're most worried about is people running automated bots, scripts that just download data from your APIs on a regular basis. Well, what this is showing, you'll notice that there are light and dark colors. But you can quite clearly see a very rhythmic pattern to calls within the API. If the API was being called by people through an app or was being something done by humans, you might see variability over a period of hours, but you wouldn't see that rhythmic call pattern. Now we've noticed that, we can go and work out what IP address is calling us. And hopefully the clip will work. Yep. What IP address is calling us. The report updates to show me which users are actually calling that report from that IP address. And this is done with test data, and we've tried it with real data, and actually the results you get are even more stark. Finally, one of the things you also might want to do is work out what's the correlation between certain operations in my APIs. So for example, if you build an API and it's used by app developers, you can tell them how they're supposed to use it, but actually, it's not always clear exactly how they're building it into applications. It may be that you find, so for example, if we select, if we select a particular operation, come on. So for example, get open orders. What we may find is there's a really strong correlation between somebody calling get open orders, and let's zoom in so you can see that, and somebody calling get order. Now, the names of those APIs aren't particularly useful because it's test data, but it may be that you can optimize your APIs because everybody's calling this one, then this one. We can then reduce bandwidth, reduce the amount of calls that people have to make. Conversely, you may find a pattern to people calling your APIs that you weren't expecting. Perhaps they've built it into their application wrong. Perhaps they're using something in your service you didn't realize was valuable within your application. So that's the Power BI solution template for Azure API Management. You probably want to know a bit more about what it actually is and how it works. So let's go back to the slides. So what we do is the solution template is deployed on your subscription. And I'll show you the URL where you can go and do this in a minute. And we deploy a bunch of Azure assets for you to use. Make it very clear, there's no additional cost for doing this. All you do is pay for the cost of the Azure assets that you deploy. So if you imagine we've got Azure API Management doing its request response like it does today, what we do is we build up a pipeline from the API Management instance, and that consists of Event Hub, Stream Analytics, and Azure SQL. And we pump data from your Azure API Management instance into SQL. It's then your data in your Azure SQL instance. You can do with it completely as you will. What we then do is provision a whole bunch of views on that data that are then consumed by Power BI. And the demo I just saw you there is using those views from an Azure SQL instance. We then add the magic sprinkles on top to do the additional research based on your API data. And we're using Logic Apps, Azure Functions, and Azure Machine Learning to do that for you. So just to run through the benefits of this and why I'd really love you to go and try it out today if you're already using Azure API Management. It runs on your subscription for less than $10 a day at the base configuration. Obviously, if you have very high traffic numbers, you may need to scale up. But that's the base cost, so you can go and try it out very simply. Provisioned all automatically through the website. We do provision a global policy into your instance. So if you're already using a global policy, let us know and we can help you make sure that doesn't cause an issue. But it's provisioned automatically. You can click to run effectively. The parts we're using to make that pipeline are all independently scalable. So if you have very high traffic demands, you can scale them up to make sure you can make that throughput work. And if you don't like it, just delete the resource group. It creates a resource group for you. Just delete it. That's all you have to do. Take out the API management policy, and you're back to where you were. It shouldn't ever have affected your API management instance whatsoever. All the source of this is shared and maintained on GitHub. So if you want to contribute or you think you see problems with it, you're welcome to send us a PR and tell us about it. And we're really, really interested to know what you think and what you feel about what's done here and if it's something that's going to be really useful to your business. And you can get all of this at aka.ms/APIMPVI. Let us know what you think. Vlad.
Thanks, Matthew. Was it cool or what?
Yes.
All right, so we have about 10 minutes left for questions, so hang around if you have any questions. But basically, just to summarize, API management helps you with exposing your APIs, works with any APIs out there, promotes developer participation, and allows you to secure, abstract, and optimize your APIs. There's some useful links for you. Our public roadmap is on the web, so you can access it freely at APIM roadmap short link. If you have a request for a feature, we maintain a site for that. Our blog has information about the release updates and the changes that we are making, as well as interesting articles about various features that we are building. And then there is a few other resources, obviously documentation, et cetera. One thing I want to leave you with is that, according to Gartner and to Don, right, differentiation does not come from building your own API management, but rather than, obviously focusing on your core domain and leaving sort of the infrastructure part to vendors like Microsoft. So if you are looking to expose your APIs, give us a try before you start building it yourself. Thank you very much. One more thing, if you're interested in integration topics, logic apps, API management, we actually have this conference coming up. It is in Redmond. It is on Microsoft campus. It will be keynoted by Scott Guthrie. And it's going to be, I think, 2 days dedicated solely to topics of integration presented by Microsoft product teams as well as partners and customers. So if you're interested in that or have someone who might be interested in that, please point them to that. And you can see a short link there as well. Last but not least, please provide evaluations. People, we definitely look at them to see what we can do better. But they also are taking into consideration when scheduling sessions for the next Ignite. So please help us out and fill out the eval whenever you have a moment. Thank you very much for your attention. And if you have any questions, please step up to microphones and or just come over.
Hi there. Is this on? Yep.
Yep.
Got a question. Is there any consideration or plans to be able to deploy the gateway in hybrid scenarios, such as into a customer's data center or a service provider's data center, potentially on something like Azure Stack?
Yeah, so we actually have a work item that we're tracking on our roadmap. So in general, yes, we are aware of that requirement, and we are considering it and we are considering it for the future. So if you go to the roadmap, you'll see it in the backlog list, and any update in its status, will reflect there.
Question. By the way, great session. The question is about selecting SaaS solution from Microsoft as API management versus, for example, we have CA API Gateway, and the conversation is always why to use one over the other. How would you describe, let's say, what's the benefits using Microsoft managed service, or basically PaaS or SaaS solution over, let's say, managed service from CA API in terms of, in your opinion?
Well, I think that
Sorry for interruption. In addition to this question, I have a similar one. We're currently using WSO2 API.
What, I'm sorry?
We're currently using WSO2,
okay, WSO2, okay.
and exploring the possibility to migrate either to TIBCO Measury or Microsoft API. So according to last Gartner report, Microsoft was not on the API market according to 2016. So in addition to this question, where you are now in 2017, and what is the benefits, where we can find more information about that?
Well, I think information. So I don't think we have sort of you can obviously find more information in some of the links that I provided. I think in general the decision-making process. Usually people look at where the API are at, what the scenarios they want to enable, and which product fits those scenarios best, and what price point you're comfortable with. I think there's a gamut of consideration, right, that you need to sort of factor in. In terms of API management, I think you sort of heard about capabilities that we provide. I think our greatest strength is that we can leverage all of Azure to achieve scale and leverage. First of all, we are obviously deployed very widely. We're available in places like China. We are very scalable. And then we can leverage work of other teams at Microsoft to build extensive capabilities into API management, such as Power BI integration, machine learning, and all the rest of it. So I think that essentially that's where we are focusing, and that's where we see us to be, sort of having an edge, versus companies that have sort of essentially, a set of products versus a platform.
Just to follow up, what is the interoperability of your policies, for example, if we start with your product, but we want to switch to another API management, like all your policies, is that interop or not?
So I think that there is no sort of, interoperability or standard for how policies are defined or what policies must exist in each solution. So everybody has their own twist and their own way of expressing them. Unfortunately, migrating is a process, right? It's not simple, and you can't just import something, except for APIs, right? The API description formats are pretty standard and very well defined. So essentially taking APIs from one solution and importing them into another should not be a big problem. Configuring policies and setting things up that's where the work is going to be. I think we can hear you. Yeah.
Question to Boeing.
Yeah,
Which
okay.
options you explored before you decided
That's a
to
good
go
question.
to-
We didn't initially go with Azure. We did our case study, and we looked at 6 different solutions, Azure being one of them. We looked at WSO2, Akana, MuleSoft, Apigee, Mashery, and Azure API Management. It was not an easy choice for us. My specific team is not a very large team, or at the time it wasn't. So we had to, on a shoestring budget, decide which solution we were going to go with. Some of the other options that are out there, not API management, they are attractive in their own rights, but when we looked at and talked to the product teams and interviewed them and said, hey, how can you help enable us? Typically they would come with great solutions, but at extreme costs. And we want to scale very, very highly to span the entire 100,000 flights per day airline industry. And with Azure API Management, we can scale, and the costs are minimal. But with these other solutions, we found that as you scale up larger, you had to add additional gateways to your API manager in the back end. And those solutions were the ones that were managing those gateways, and you were paying $60K a month per gateway. So it was a question of, can we scale with this solution? And I don't think that Vlad answered the question as hard as I wanted him to when he said, why Azure versus these other options? He mentioned Azure as one of the reasons why you might want to use Azure API Management, but we, Boeing, have found that leveraging the full breadth of the Azure cloud has been absolutely game-changing for us. Without that, without Azure, the Azure cloud and all the services that come with it, the decision would have been harder, but it's a no-brainer at this point for us.
Hey, thanks for the session. I have 2 different questions. First one being, can this solution help in dealing with sort of dynamic models? So your requests and responses are changing per client and so on and so forth. Is there something that you said about enhancing or the response or request? Is that something that's actually a viable solution, or it's
Changing, meaning the shape
the
of the
content?
data?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we essentially, very, flexible in that respect. So I think that should be no problem at all.
Okay. And one of the other things is we are trying to be, in certain aspects, Azure agnostic in terms of by using Service Fabric, which can run, as you pointed out, in different environments.
Yes.
But then if we front that with this solution, is that sort of constitutes a cloud lock-in?
Cloud?
Lock-in. So basically you're locked into Azure, right? If you introduce this layer in front of Service Fabric.
So that is true. I mean, we are, Azure service, right? So obviously, if you're using us, we're not available, in other clouds for sure. So if that's sort of your hard requirement, then yes, that would be a consideration for sure.
We're out of time, but we can take more questions down here at the front if that's all right. Come and have a chat to us. But thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.